Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. Big development today in the Red Bull saga, with news sources suggesting that Max Verstappen's departure from the team is not only likely, but his probable destination may not be Mercedes and actually could be, for various reasons of 2025 and beyond, none other than Aston Martin. Various reasons that are pointing in this direction at the moment. What is going on behind the scenes at Red Bull? Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. First of all, I know I'm talking to Ollie Behrman every day at this point, but to be fair, for a rather good reason, because there still is a question whether Behrman might be in the car again come Australia, right, in just next weekend. For any normal human, if you have appendicitis, you have surgery, you're probably not going to be driving a Formula 1 car 2 weeks later. But, you know, the recovery, the fitness on these guys is obviously built different, and we know how usually they are back and ready to go far sooner than you might otherwise expect. Ricciardo, to be fair, when he broke his wrist, he did have longer off than maybe he was hoping for, but I'm expecting Sainz to be back in the car in Australia. That would be the presumption, but it's still not an absolute guarantee. And today Behrman was in the F175, so of course the 2022 Ferrari, the beautiful car, look how nice, you know, the kind of darker red on the livery, the beautiful side pods, makes me miss those early days of 2022 really. But yeah, Ollie was at Fiorano today testing at the F175 with that testing program. So Antonelli will be doing the same at Mercedes, testing every single, you know, basically every hour in the car that they can get away with on the testing programs. That's what Antonelli will do at Mercedes. That's what Behrman is doing here at Ferrari. Unlikely to be a Ferrari driver for a good couple of years, because the Hamilton-Leclerc thing is going to be around for some time. We're thinking Behrman to Haas makes the most sense at the moment, but there are still questions whether he could have another outing in Australia. Ferrari hasn't confirmed this yet. Who's going to partner Charles Leclerc? Will Sainz be back? To be fair, right, he was in the paddock already on the Saturday race. He was in the garage. He had the headset on. Okay, he was walking kind of gingerly, but I'm sure that Sainz wants to be back in the car in a couple of weeks' time, and he almost certainly will be, but I guess you can't completely rule out the possibility of something else going on. And also, Charles Leclerc made the point that Ferrari are making progress. They have closed the gap quite substantially from last year to this year in terms of the deficit to Red Bull. Unfortunately for them and for everybody else, there is still a big gap to go. But Charles does say it's only a matter of time until we can actually put Red Bull under some more pressure. And, you know, we talked about this last season, that by the end of the year, potentially, if Red Bull start to focus on the year after's car, we could have some competitive races towards the end of the season. We kind of expected that to happen last year. It didn't really happen, to be honest, and that might be because there's more performance in the Red Bull than meets the eye. Max isn't exactly driving it flat out, is he? And he's still winning by a long way. So I guess we'll see how that one develops. But of course, speaking of Red Bull and the guy that designed this car, yes, there's an entire team behind the car, and there's always debate on how important Adrian Newey really is to the design of the car. People have different schools of thoughts on this, saying that, well, you know, there's loads of other people involved, as of course there most certainly is. Newey doesn't design every single, you know, nut and bolt of the car and piece it all together. There's hundreds of engineers working on it, but of course Newey is leading the way from the visionary perspective and has designed very important parts of this current spec of regulations for the Red Bull, absolutely. So there's people that say, well, Newey maybe isn't as important as people say that he is. Obviously, there's loads of other talented guys as well, but I think there's even been some reporting lately that basically says Newey effectively controls the show, and the suspension, for example, that is completely defines this set of regulations of Red Bull, that was entirely Newey designed going into this set. So it may be possible to overstate the importance of Newey, but you definitely don't want to understate the importance of Newey to any Formula 1 project. Now, rumours occurred yesterday from AMUS. Now, just worth keeping in mind here exactly where these rumours are coming from, because the German and the Dutch media are generally of the opinion that there's chaos going on, things are happening. The British media tend to be more of the opinion that, well, Horner's probably going to stay, things are slightly more calm. So you might want to just consider where the relevant sources are getting their information from in terms of which individuals are closer to those sources. But yesterday we heard rumours that Newey is unhappy with the situation, potentially is going to be gone, budget cap reasons. Obviously, a move elsewhere would be considered. Today, however, John Noble saying from Motorsport, Autosport, and we'll discuss another big report from Autosport here in a second, on Newey is probably going to stay. He will stay in his role. For now, I think generally the perception was that nothing is changing from the sources that they've heard for now. Doesn't mean that that won't necessarily be the case at some point, but as it stands, there's no, you know, not like Newey's immediately going to be gone or anything. The plan is to keep him in his current role working on the RB17 hypercar project and the Formula 1 project, project, but, in the next couple of years when the budget cap regulations change, that could be something of a different story. But Autosport as of today saying that Newey is going to stay at Red Bull. Those reports that we saw yesterday wide of the mark, and I guess we'll see if anything changes there. Let's be honest, it seems unlikely that Newey's going to go anywhere, but Toto Wolff has entertained the possibility. He actually said this, kind of on the topic of hiring Newey: anything is possible in this crazy carousel. I can't rule anything out, but we have an excellent technical team. I feel comfortable with them. We are well positioned, even if the lap times do not reflect that at the moment, right? And this is the key point for Mercedes, and also one of the reasons why this whole Aston Martin Verstappen idea that's come up pretty much as of today actually does make a little bit of sense, because if you're Verstappen, you're looking at the potential teams you could go to if things were to completely explode at Red Bull, as Jos Verstappen says they will if Horner stays in charge. You're not going to go to Ferrari because they've got Leclerc, Hamilton. They're not going to change their mind on that one. The obvious seat is the Mercedes, but the Mercedes is not at a good spot at the moment. And questions, especially because Hamilton leaves Mercedes, right? What does that tell Verstappen about his confidence in that Mercedes outfit for the coming years? Might not say too much. And Toto can keep saying all he wants publicly that, well, we've got an excellent technical team. I'm fully confident. And yet for the third year in a row, they have created a highly underwhelming car. Toto Wolff also said that he's not ruling out the possibility of Newey. There are exciting scenarios if Horner is to stay. And I think this is the key point, that the belief is in the paddock and around the grid in general that if Horner is to stay, things will break down at Red Bull from the Verstappen, from the Marco, from the Newey perspective as well. And then other teams, of course, while they didn't necessarily instigate all this drama in the first place, they want to be well positioned to try to pick up the pieces. But as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't seem a guarantee at all that Horner goes anywhere. There's been much mixed reporting over this over the last couple of days. Some saying, no, Horner's going to stay, don't worry about it. Some saying, no, it's a done deal. Horner's out of there before Melbourne. The owners have changed their mind. But, there'd have to be some pretty strong reasoning as to why they would change their minds. The tyre owners are clearly standing by Horner. The rumour was the other day that Walmart are threatening to no longer sell Red Bull in their stores if Horner stays without good explanation. At which point the tyre owners might say, well, it's probably best to get rid of Horner. But if they can come up with a reasonable explanation, or they can share some of the reports with these partners and just say, look, we did our due diligence here. Horner was innocent. The woman in question was being dishonest. This is the present rumour as to why they've apparently suspended her. We just don't really know at the moment. But if they can say that and actually be truthful about it, then the partners that have been questioning this might say, all right, you know what, fair enough. Let's keep on with the status quo. And we're kind of seeing that a bit today with Ford, because there were rumours that maybe Ford were going to pull out of this, maybe they weren't. After all the drama, Ford's CEO had definitely put the pressure on Red Bull to be transparent over the Horner investigation. But as of today, the Red Bull Academy program has officially confirmed their partnership with Ford for the F1 Academy season. So this is a done deal. Ford are not going to pull out. That partnership is maintained, and what does that potentially tell you about the future of Horner in that organisation if it's not really affecting the partners they have for now, and the main reason why they want to keep Horner because of the change in ownership, the change of structure of the business around Red Bull Technologies over the coming years. And maybe, if those rumours are to be believed, that might be why Verstappen is considering an exit. Now, this is what Joe Soward says. Great green notebook again. Of course, I'll leave a link down below for you guys if you want to check it out. Just wanted to highlight a couple of paragraphs here, because as he says, at the end of the day, I don't much care who wins control of Red Bull Racing, but I'll do my best to find out how and why they achieved it when it happens. Until then, I will focus on the impact of this fight on the sport. Do I think that peace can be found between the warring parties? We're talking about the Austrian side of the business, the Thai side of the business, but probably mainly Horner versus Marco in some respects, as our understanding. He does not reckon that can be the case. If peace is found, it will only be for as long as is necessary. So much has been broken in the last few weeks that trust will never return, and it seems that this goes both ways. In the end, the outcome will depend on power, and if necessary, on the justice system. I am sure that heads will roll, but I am not sure which heads they will be. So, interesting statements really, just, from Joe Sauer, what he's heard behind the scenes in the paddock and stuff, that, Red Bull are going to explode. It's a matter of who stays and who goes. And of course, that opens the door to other teams to take advantage. And this is when, of course, the Max Verstappen conversation has come up. Yes, Max would be giving up. Let's say Max was to leave after this season. He would be giving up effectively a slam dunk championship in 2025. But I think Sauer even mentions earlier on in the article that there's a current rally champion that's done a very similar thing at the moment. So it's possibly not entirely out of the question, but as he does close out his report with the rest of this year is going to be a roller coaster, and that's when rumours start to emerge today about a potential alternative for Verstappen. It still seems more likely than not that he will stay at Red Bull and they will find a resolution, but Sauer believes, everyone seems to believe, that there isn't a long-term resolution to that situation. Either Horner has to go or Marco has to go, and if Marco goes, Verstappen has said that he's going to go, and Jos Verstappen as well. So maybe you argue it's 50-50, it either happens or it doesn't, and maybe you think it's more likely that Horner goes than he stays, but we simply don't know as it stands. If Verstappen was to go, which feels like a plausible possibility, maybe not likely, but certainly plausible on what's happened over these last few weeks and the chaos that is undoubtedly behind the scenes there at Red Bull. Reports today that an Aston Martin move might actually make some sense, and I think the number one reason why is Honda. The feeling might be from the Verstappen camp, and maybe understandably so, that Red Bull, yes, they're dominating Formula 1 right now like we've really never seen before. They're going to dominate this championship. They're probably going to dominate next year's championship as well. But 2026 is a different kettle of fish. They've got to make their own engine. Red Bull Technologies. Right now, they've used the Honda engine, which was suspect 10 years ago, but as of today, is absolutely fantastic, and is arguably the strongest engine on the grid, certainly from the electrical side of the components. Red Bull have to do that for 2026. Let's not forget that it wasn't that long ago that Max and Horner were very publicly saying, we don't like these engine regulations for 2026. They're going to be bad for all these certain reasons. The other teams were like, well, maybe you're right, but, we ain't changing the rules now, buddy. Let's just crack on, and mainly saying that they were wrong. But the feeling is, when you have Max and you have Horner and you have the entire Red Bull team coming out publicly to try and lobby for changes in the engine rules in a couple of years' time, does that make you believe that they're killing it in their development behind the scenes? Not necessarily. So it's quite plausible that Verstappen's camp feels that in 2026, Red Bull are not going to be at all the same team they are today. And maybe it makes sense to sacrifice 1 year in 2025 to join a team that might. Aston Martin, on paper you'd think, okay, this doesn't make any sense. Just join Mercedes. No, but there are a few things that Aston Martin actually have going for it, right? And as I say, primarily the Honda partnership, I would say, because Aston Martin, yes, they had a lot of podiums last year in 2023 with Fernando Alonso, very impressively so. I think the feeling was that they would do very well to replicate that success this year. It was expected that certainly Ferrari, Mercedes, McLaren would take steps forward. So Aston Martin, having had a giant leap in 2023, mainly because the other teams at the top messed up, let's be honest about it. This year, when those other teams have taken some steps forward, Aston Martin are now in a less competitive position. They're still a pretty solid car, though. Alonso still had a pretty damn good result in Jeddah, and potentially more to come from the Aston Martin as well on present rumours. You've also got to understand that in those new circular regulations, that's when all of the Stroll investment, the Lawrence Stroll investment into the team, starts to actually hit the ground. The massive factory they've built, their own wind tunnel, everything they've got there to build cars. That's not currently involved in building their current projects to the same extent that it will be in a couple of years' time. They have hired loads of people from Red Bull and from elsewhere over the last few years. There is no doubt that Aston Martin, in Lawrence Stroll's opinion, is intended to be an absolute cream of the crop top Formula 1 team. And there's an argument that they can get there at some point, especially because they are partnering exclusively with Honda, the engine supplier for Red Bull as it stands, in 2026 and beyond. They are going to be a Honda Works team with all of those other resources. So there's an argument that says if Mercedes are on the decline, Aston for 2026 doesn't look like a bad possibility at all. Fernando Alonso as well has made it quite clear that he doesn't really know what his future is going to be, whether he's going to retire, whether obviously if the Red Bull seat opened up, then certainly he'd want to go there. Of course, a Mercedes seat might be a good option as well, but it's been noted the number one option for Aston is Verstappen. Lawrence Stroll will do whatever it takes, financially or otherwise, to get him on board, as was the case when he got Vettel and Alonso to join the project in the first place. So, this coming from Adam Cooper, from Motorsport, from Autosport, the same guys that reported a few hours ago that knew he's probably going to stay. So, this is pretty reputable stuff, to be fair. And yes, it's opinion in part, but there's also rumours in the paddock, apparently, that this is at least conversations are being had to this effect. So, obviously, why would Aston make sense of Verstappen? You might have Lance Stroll as a teammate. Would be a hilariously balanced partnership, wouldn't it? Like, if Lawrence Stroll hasn't embarrassed his son enough already by partnering him with Alonso, then surely he really is asking for trouble in partnering him with Max. But I guess we'll see. And for Verstappen, you don't have to worry about pressure on the other side of the garage if you've got Lance Stroll as your teammate, I suppose. And the fact that it's becoming a Honda Works outfit, no longer a Mercedes customer, no longer relying on the gearboxes and suspension parts provided by Brackley, Verstappen knows a lot about Honda. He's been with them for a very long time indeed. So the more you hear about this, the more you've got to understand that actually maybe there is something in this that actually makes it make some degree of sense. Especially because if I'm Max, am I looking at Mercedes as the team that's going to get back to the top? It depends, right? I mean, they won 8 constructors' titles in a row. But as I said yesterday, I feel like Ferrari are best positioned to be the next champions when Red Bull don't win a championship, which is going to happen at some point. It'll be quite some time. But at some point, Red Bull aren't going to win everything. And which team is going to pick up the slack and actually win something? Ferrari seem like they're on the best trajectory right now. Mercedes, I mean, they're on the decline, let's be honest about it, right? Russell has said, Toto Wolff has said, they're lacking performance in the high-speed corners. They just don't understand why. They're struggling to understand the car. Their simulations don't match what they see in reality. And it's like, this is the 3rd year in a row this is happening. And in reality, they're having a shockingly weak start to the season. Like, I think this is Mercedes' worst start. It's definitely got to be, actually. Their worst start to a season in the turbo hybrid era, like in the last 10, 11 years. This is their worst season start. Red Bull have 87 points this year, same as last year actually. Aston Martin last year had 38, as did Mercedes after 2 races. This year, Mercedes have 26. Now yes, Aston only have 13, but realistically speaking, these other teams have taken some steps forwards, and Aston last year I think were generally picking up the slack of Mercedes, Ferrari and certainly McLaren that had a very poor start to the season. Does that mean that Aston, in the medium term, are a legitimate potential candidate to be a top Formula 1 project team? I think the argument is certainly there. And if Verstappen looks at Hamilton and wonders why he might have fully made the decision to leave Mercedes, there might be more to this than initially meets the eye. Of course, if he leaves Red Bull, which is the first hurdle to go over, but if he were to, it does feel like Aston or Mercedes are actually the realistic options right now. Of course, for Mercedes, this would raise other questions about what happens to their seats. Obviously, they're looking at Antonelli and Russell as a potential partnership, but what if they feel that Antonelli to the Williams makes a bit more sense for a couple of years? That's plausible. Talk about Carlos Sainz, of course, as well. Could he go in there? Rumour has it that his entire entourage, Sainz, on the weekend that he had his operation, stayed in the Mercedes garage for a long time. So it seems like there were big conversations being had between Sainz and Mercedes. I don't know how keen Toto Wolff will be to entertain those conversations, but it's something to at least think about. Just one final thing to mention for you guys that was spotted during the weekend. Everybody knows about Norris, who jumps the start, but wasn't penalised because the sensors didn't detect it. The sensors don't seem to be very sensitive, maybe for good reason, because if they're too sensitive, they'll get loads of false positives. But if the sensors don't detect that you moved, then you get away with it. That is basically how it works. And Sergio Perez did effectively the same thing. So this is how it's going. Here's Sergio Perez in P3. You guys probably know that he got the best start on the grid, right? Was very, very close to taking Charles Leclerc, but Charles Leclerc defended very well. Let's see how he managed to do that, right? Just keep an eye here on the right-hand side, this wing mirror, and where it intersects this yellow line. If I go forward a few frames, you can see that now there's a bit more of a gap. Maybe you can't see it quite clearly right here, but basically over these few frames, he is creeping forwards as the lights are going on. You can probably better see it actually here on this video, where we have Sergio Perez with 2 lights on. By the time he gets to 3 lights on the car, we can see that right about here, he's starting to creep forward. You can actually see here, the tyres are just about turning at this point. 4 lights go on, and now Perez is definitely creeping forward. Now, it's not much, obviously. It's pretty marginal, but you can actually see it right here if I just go back and forth. The fact that he's rolling as the light, I mean, it's pretty blatant, right? He's rolling as the lights go out, and then he effectively gets, a nice rolling start to the race. Now, again, this wasn't detected by the sensors, even though, and maybe technically it's fine because he's just about within the lines and he's not moving enough, but it's definitely something that arguably should be fully against the rules, or we might see other drivers exploiting, because clearly Perez used this to his advantage. Line up just behind the yellow line. As it gets to like 3 or 4 lights, start to creep forward, hope that the lights go out just before you get out of your box, and then hit what is effectively a rolling start. So, and nearly use it to his advantage here. So I wonder if other drivers will try this as well, or whether the FIA will say something about it. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.